Good evening. Welcome to the Select Board meeting for Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021. Let's go right into announcements and updates. I have a few. I will try to be brief. Shortly, you'll hear from Select Board member Miriam about a mask memo that we got from our Director of Public Health. But I wanted to share an event that I attended on Sunday. This past Sunday, I joined a number of mourners for a vigil for Patricia Patty Arellano in honor of Worldwide Day of Remembrance for traffic crash victims. Patty, who was 63, was struck by a motor vehicle at the intersection of Downing Road and Washington Street here in Brookline on November 5th, 2021, shortly before 11:23 a.m. while she was crossing the street in the crosswalk. She later passed away from her injuries. I am working with the chair of the Transportation Board to figure out what policies we can put in place to address this very horrific situation. And I know the Norfolk County DA is investigating. The other announcement that I would like to make is that the Brookline High boys soccer team beat out Newton North High School over the weekend for their first state championship in double overtime. I also want to give a shout out to the Rotary and Brookline Police Department for distributing meals at Brookline High School tonight. Miriam, do you have a few announcements?
Yes, thank you. In fact, I have quite a few today, so I will try to keep, and they're almost all public health related. I'll start with the one that isn't public health related, and that's that the cross country team, boys cross country team, also took second. And I have to say that because my son runs cross country. During the past 2 weeks, Massachusetts has experienced a 37% increase in COVID-19 hospitalizations. We are coming off a down. We have a little bit of blip since just before Halloween. And of course, we're headed into the holidays where we can expect with a lot of travel and interpersonal relationships that we are at risk for seeing that those numbers continue to go up. With the weekly case counts going up, the fact that Norfolk County is still considered high, the mask mandate was reviewed, and based on current transmission rates, the recent increase in cases and hospitalizations, the Public Health Department believes that we should stay the course with our current comprehensive public health prevention strategies, which include wearing masks indoors, getting vaccinated, boosters, regular testing, ventilation, and quarantine and isolation of identified cases. So the bottom line, folks, is the mask mandate is here to stay for the near future. We will continue to reevaluate it and keep a very close eye, especially on case counts and hospitalizations post Thanksgiving and with the winter holidays coming up as well. That said, two other big pieces of news. The first is the governor has approved booster shots. I mean, it's really not him, it should be the CDC, but anyways, booster shots have been approved for all adults. So you should feel free to find a clinic and CVS or anything, any place, and get a booster shot. And if you had Pfizer and what is available to you is Moderna, go for it. It doesn't actually matter if you had Moderna and it's Pfizer, you can mix and match. So get whatever booster shot you can get. And please do get your booster shot. I'm getting mine this week. Also, the Brookline Health Department will be having a weekly COVID vaccine clinic on Thursdays from 1 to 4. And that is going to be at 11 Pierce Street. And you can get your first shot, your second shot. I'm guessing you'll be able to get boosters. And you can also call and request an appointment for another day or time if you aren't free on Thursday. So to schedule an appointment, you can call the public health nurse, Elizabeth Bennett, at 617-730-2320. On that note, Mel and I are going to be on a public health director screening panel, and Mel's, Mel, and the members of the panel are myself, Dr. Alfred de Maria, former infectious disease physician and medical director and state epidemiologist. Howard Cox, who's from the BU School of Public Health and the former chief health officer for Cambridge. Pat Mehar, RN, who's a Brookline resident, member of the Advisory Council on Public Health, and Dr. Annapurna Poduri, Brookline resident, Boston Children's Hospital, Harvard Medical School neurologist, pediatric neurologist, and a parent of high school students. I also wanted to bring your attention, I'm almost done. The Community Foundation is having an ARPA gathering to get input from the community on how to spend the $43 million. And there is space, 50 people have registered, please register. It will be on December 15th from 6 to 8. The location still be determined, most likely the Teen Center, and you can go to my website, my Facebook page for more details, and my Instagram, yay. And finally, the Transgender Day of Remembrance, also known as International Transgender Day of Remembrance, was observed on Saturday, November 20th. We observed that day to memorialize those who have been murdered as a result of transphobia. And I just want us to highlight that that day passed on Saturday, and we should pause and think about our friends who need our support and be good allies. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. John, then Raul, then Bernard.
I first want to thank Miriam for getting through all of those announcements so well. I never could have done them that well and that quickly. I do want to just underscore 3 items that have already been mentioned tonight, because I just think, you know, they constitute some important news from the community. Some of it, you know, very good news and happy news, some of it not so happy. Let's start with the happy news. Heather mentioned the Thanksgiving dinner that is ongoing as we speak, and I'm going to defer to Bernard Green, who's here to talk a little bit more about it if he chooses, because he was actually over there helping to prepare. And I was not over there helping to prepare, I'm sorry to say, but I was able to check in with somebody who's on the scene just before the meeting. There's about 100 people who are coming to have dinner. Really good work done by the Brookline Police Department, the Brookline Police Union, Rotary, and Brookline High School. You know, all of those folks coming together, making this happen, reaching out to the community, letting people know that if they wanted to share Thanksgiving dinner early with friends and you know, might not have another opportunity to have a good Thanksgiving dinner, this was a chance to do it. I kind of wish I could be there, but and I want to second the idea of Thanksgiving on Tuesdays. I think that might be actually a good idea for the future. So that's one piece of good news. Second piece of good news is that victory by the high school soccer team. What a uplift for the community. I was speaking to the parent of one of the young men on the team the night before, and this parent aloud is how the team was so thrilled just to be where they were, you know, in the competition, but you know, not sure that they were going to emerge victorious. They didn't want to get their hopes up too high. What a game, double overtime. And I happened to watch the video of it, and the person doing the announcing just about fell out of the stands with the excitement of that moment. Team dyed its hair blonde for the occasion, which I thought was kind of neat. As I said online, I might try to do that, except I don't have any hair. So, you know, you got to do what you can to build team spirit. And now to the news that is not by any means happy news, but it's an indication of an issue that people in the community are really, really concerned about. And that is, as Heather mentioned, the recent traffic crash death that we had. And the other recent incidents of traffic crashes that caused injury to people in the community. I happen to have a newsletter that I put out once a week, and I sent the newsletter out Monday with some thoughts on the traffic situation in the town and the safety situation. I have to say, I had more response to this particular issue of the newsletter than any of the prior issues of the newsletter. Just overwhelming number of people who want to be part of making our streets safer. And we've got work to do, as they say, but I want this particular tragedy to be a moment that the community comes together and prevents future tragedies from ever happening. So I know that my fellow board members also have the same feeling about that. And those are my 3 announcements.
Raul?
Thank you, Heather. And I'll just say, you know, there's a lot that's been discussed that that I'd normally want to comment on too, but in the interest of moving the meeting along, I do want to just give a shout out to the Brookline Chamber of Commerce and all the small businesses in Brookline that made the first night celebration this past weekend just so memorable. We were out there and it was absolutely wonderful to see so many people out and about in community and shopping together, and it was a lot of fun. I also want to give a special shout out to the Brookline Booksmith, which is celebrating its 60th anniversary, and make sure that along your you're doing your holiday shopping, you make sure you give them a look, as well as some of the other great businesses in Brookline. And so much love to them. And if I don't get a chance to say it before the meeting ends, you know, good. Wish you all well in this upcoming break, and hopefully you get some time with family or without family, if that's what you prefer, how you prefer to spend the break. But I hope everybody gets a chance to rest and rejuvenate. I know we've got some more nights of town meeting coming up, and just personally, you know, I know it's been a long year, so hope everybody gets a chance to relax a little bit.
Great. Bernard?
Okay, let me be quick. I just got back from the Thanksgiving meal that's being served at the high school. I was just there to help set up. It was really a great event. And John gave most of the information that I think is important. A few details. A huge volunteer, body of volunteers showed up, showing the commitment to volunteerism here in the community to assist people who are needy or just lonely and want to come out to a meal like this in order to see other people and meet other people. It was held in the new science wing. If you haven't had a chance to visit there, try to make time to do so. It's a beautiful new wing. It has an incredible professional kitchen, which I toured because I like kitchens. It's just something that we all should visit and know about, because we had such a big role in it. There were many Rotarians with their red Rotarians at work T-shirts. Many members of the Brookline Police Department, including Bear and a dog from Newton, Leo, who the kids just loved. And also, as he always is, Tommy Vitolo was there to help out. He could stay later than I could and is doing some serving. So, he's probably more useful than I was, although I think I did help a little bit. But anyway, a great event. It says a lot about both the Rotarians, the police department, the high school, and the community in general. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Bernard. And, I was listening when you asked for a later start time last week. And unfortunately, with the library trustee interviews and the redistricting presentation, I just couldn't accommodate that. But what I'll try to do is make sure that we work with the Rotary next year so that maybe we can start later than we usually do. Set some time aside for this particular week.
And by the way, can I add that there are a number of other opportunities to serve people during this holiday weekend. I know the Brookline Housing Authority is distributing food tomorrow. If I can do it, I'm going to try to participate. And then First United Church at Harvard and whatever the street is, on Harvard Street, usually has a Thanksgiving dinner on Thanksgiving. So if people have time this weekend, check out the opportunities to help out with these events that are being held in our community. So.
Great. Great suggestion. Before I call on Mel Kleckner, who has a few words to say about pedestrian safety, I just want to say a announcement that I forgot to mention, which is there's a public hearing that is on our agenda later in the meeting for the Iris Hotel that has been postponed. Mel?
Thank you, Heather. I wanted also to have an opportunity to follow up on the matter of the pedestrian crashes. It's hard to really say anything that would be acceptable at this time following such a tragedy, but I do think it's important for me to report to the board and to the community on what happens in the event after these tragedies, and what possible opportunities and initiatives the town will be pursuing. Obviously, there's been a number of serious pedestrian crashes that have taken place in Brookline recently, including the fatal one on Washington Street at Downing Road that took the life of Patricia Arellano. I'm joined tonight by Acting Chief of Police Mark Morgan, Commissioner of Public Works Aaron Galantine, and Transportation Administrator Todd Corain. Collectively, we wish to express our sympathy to Patricia's family and friends, and to all those personally impacted by this and other pedestrian crashes. It would not be appropriate to discuss the details of the Downing Road crash, given that it continues to be under investigation by Brookline Police and Norfolk County District Attorney's Office. However, I want the board to be assured that after all crashes, a team of town and often state officials convene to understand the conditions that could have led to a crash. Speed and traffic counters are often placed in the vicinity to collect important data. Officers are assigned to an area for intensive traffic enforcement. In the days following the Downing Road incident, for example, approximately 14 hours of observation and enforcement has taken place. Violations have been issued during enforcement activities for speeding, including 2 within the posted school zone, and a citation was issued for a crosswalk violation. If there are physical improvements that can be readily made, those will be done. For example, following a crash at Longwood in Kent, the signal was reprogrammed for an exclusive pedestrian phase, and some temporary stanchions have extended the curb in that crosswalk until a more permanent solution is available. But with nearly 900 crosswalks in Brookline, there needs to be a much more proactive and systematic approach, requiring more consistent and reliable funding. And although we are encouraged with the new federal infrastructure bill, staffing issues are a major focus also when it comes to this. I know that the Transportation Board has been discussing this matter and will continue to provide leadership on pedestrian safety. Chair Brian Kane announced that the Commission will consider the merits of adopting Vision Zero, which is a strategy designed to eliminate traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe, healthy, and equitable mobility for all. Vision Zero has proved successful across Europe, and now it's gaining momentum in many American cities, including Boston and Somerville locally. Vision Zero adopts some new strategies and approaches, including that traffic deaths are preventable, that human failure must be integrated into the approach, that the focus on prevention is for severe and fatal crashes, that a systems approach is used, and that saving lives is not expensive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mel. Should I call on any of the staff that I see?
No, I think they're here to support, and if you had any questions.
Thank you very much for being here. Do any of the select board members have any questions for staff or for Mel? Raul.
If we can, and I know that every incident is different. But I do think folks are going to be out there wondering, okay, there's an investigation underway. How long does that typically take? When can we expect to learn more? So, and again, I know that every incident is different, but if you can give anyone out there a sense of what this might look like, that'd be helpful. And I don't know if that's good for you, Chief Morgan.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I can't give you a definitive answer when it's going to be. There is some forensic evidence that we're examining as far as, and we need to get that process done. One may be up to 30 days. The biggest thing as far as for any additional charges would be whether any negligence was involved in the accident, as far as that to make. So we're trying to ascertain whether is that a factor or relating cause of this accident. The biggest things in traffic control, as far as police, are the 3 E's, which are education, engineering, and lastly, enforcement. So all those things go into making the roadway safer. So but as far as the investigation itself, it could be up to 30 days before we have a final resolution to which way this case is going to go.
Understood. Thank you.
John?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mel, very much for those comments. I think this is something that you've really captured the importance of this, and the presence of the other officials here is extremely important in that regard. Also, I just want to say to the team that if they haven't already, added to their investigation to-do list, I hope they will add to the to-do list to talk to the folks from Orchard Road and from Downing Road, and maybe some of the other nearby streets, who are very, very familiar with this particular intersection and with some of the aspects of the intersection that are worth thinking about in terms of design, and in terms of the situation that confronts motorists who are passing down Washington Street and turn right onto Downing Road. I'll just leave it at that and won't go into particulars, but I found after the vigil on Sunday that there were neighbors who wanted to talk, and they have some things to say about the particulars of that intersection. I also think that what should be looked at for context is what happens in a neighborhood when there is a lot of active construction in the nearby area. And we've got the Driscoll School construction that's going to be going on, and we've got the construction at the what's going to be the future Whole Foods site. And then we're going to have some additional construction with a 40B project on Bartlett Crescent. And all of that brings a lot of construction vehicle activity into the area, which then creates certain obstructions and hazards in and of itself, just because of movement in and out of large equipment, and large equipment parked in places that sometimes block visibility, sometimes block safe pedestrian passage. So I do hope that context will also be part of the follow-up to this tragedy. That's all I'm going to say right now.
Thank you. Bernard?
Okay, I'm glad that you mentioned Vision Zero, Mel. That seems to be an important program that doesn't guarantee no highway fatalities, but does provide a way to intentionally address unsafe conditions as well as other factors. So if you or Todd or whoever could provide the board with just some information on that, assuming that you're planning to adopt that approach, I think that would be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for making yourselves a bit available for us tonight and for working on this issue. Let's slide into public comment.
Great. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us and joining us for public comment. This is an opportunity for us to hear your perspective on the issues in Brookline that matter to you. We have a few rules that I'd like to share. Each person speaking tonight is limited to 3 minutes. You don't need to use the entire time, but you may if you like. Please refrain from personal attacks and from addressing personnel issues during your comments. Members of the public sometimes raise questions during public comment. We may be able to provide a quick answer to a question, but are more likely to work with staff to get a more thorough answer and respond over email. We'll let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining, and when your time is up, please conclude your remarks at that time. If If you have more to say, you're welcome to send an email to board members expressing your thoughts in greater detail. So who's first on our list?
The first person signed up for public comment is Rachel Schultz. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Good, thank you. Good evening. I'm Rachel O'Brien Schultz, Brookline homeowner and resident for over 30 years and an MIT fellow. My son graduated from Brookline High School, is now a PhD researcher in computational biology. My husband is a principal member of the technical staff at Draper Lab. I'll make a brief statement on sustainability, Brookline's engagement, and resident participation. There's scientific and political consensus that citizens' participation in sustainability. Does Brookline have sustainability in the town mission? Who represents this mission? What is their charter? And is this visible to Brookline residents? How does Brookline inform and engage the Brookline public in sustainability? Is the Brookline public invited to participate and contribute? My suggestions to the Select Board. In addition to sustainability activities initiated by those delegated by the Brookline Selectmen, the Brookline Library can contribute by engaging the reading public in sustainability, especially the young public who contribute as adults. The tab lists the Brookline Library interest group meetings. It does not include sustainability. The library can host sustainability discussion groups. Related publications can be in the collection and visibly displayed for adults, youth, and children. I met our Congressman, Jake Auchincloss, and his local staff, Dana Hansen, at a virtual Brookline town meeting just as today. We correspond about MIT activities related to the Congressman's mission. We had Zoom meetings and over 11 email exchanges with the Congressman's staff since our February visual Brookline town meeting. In addition, I engaged the Congressman's staff in MIT's program for junior colleges that trains students for jobs that interface with robots and automated manufacturing and connects the graduates with employers. They were all offered and accepted jobs. This one brief discussion at a Brookline town meeting was beneficial. Engaging citizens can lead to useful contributions. I participated in MIT sustainability meetings that take a global view. I look forward to engaging with the Brookline sustainability program that has a local Brookline mission. Please direct me. Thank you.
At this time, no one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Great, thank you, Devin. Would you provide Tom Barasso's email contact information to Rachel?
Yes.
He's our sustainability director.
All right.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Let's move into the miscellaneous. Approving the meeting minutes from November 16th, 2021. Any edits, changes, updates, comments? Otherwise, I will move approval of the meeting minutes from November 16th. All those in favor? Bernard? Bernard?
Aye.
Thank you. Raul?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye. Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Now I'll just briefly run through the rest of the miscellaneous agenda items. Approving the authorization to hire a request for an assistant payroll director in the payroll division of the finance department approving the authorization to hire request for a finance assistant in the Treasury Division of the Finance Department, approving the authorization to hire request for 2 case investigators, epidemiologists in the Public Health Nursing Division of the Public Health and Human Services Department, approving the application of Sanad Ishtiwi as an alternate manager for sanctuary medicinals, and finally approving the application of Bradley Doyle as an alternate manager for NETA. All those in favor, Bernard,
Aye.
Raul,
All right.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you very much. So now I have the distinct pleasure of presenting the findings of the Redistricting Committee's work. Devin, if you can promote Ben Kaufman and Dave Gayshak. Ben has prepared a small and short presentation, so I'll ask him to share and perhaps start, and then I will take over and I will rely on Dave for some maps.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you see my screen?
It seems to be in portrait mode.
Try one more time. Is that better?
Hold on. Yes.
Excellent. So yes, the Redistricting Committee has been meeting diligently every Thursday for the last couple of months, putting together a map for the Select Board to review and approve at your discretion. So the committee was made up of one town meeting member from each precinct, and was chaired by Chair Hamilton and was vice chaired by Dave Gayshak from precinct 13. And I want to give a special shout out to Jed Fehrenbach, the GIS administrator, who did a huge amount of work with this committee, making sure that we were able to put the maps together.
And an incredible amount of work by Ben Kaufman as well. He won't take credit for it, but just wanted to make sure that it was said.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Madam Chair, I don't know if you wanted to do the overview or if you would like for me to run through it.
Why don't you get started and I'll try to fill in.
That sounds good. So, as some of you may know, every 10 years, the state, the federal government, the state government, and local governments undergo a redistricting process following the decennial US Census. And this is to redraw precinct and district lines to account for changes in population. State Senate representative, US Congressional and Governor's Council districts are drawn by the state legislature and approved by the governor. And Brookline's local precincts are drawn by the Redistricting Committee and are approved by the Select Board. The precincts must follow a few requirements. The biggest ones are for it to be a contiguous precinct. It must follow census block lines and clear boundaries. Each precinct must have under 4,000 people in it, and they must be within 5% population-wise of all of the other precincts in town, within 5% of the mean. The 2020 census in Brookline showed a growth in our population from 58,732 in 2010 to 63,191 in 2020. And you can see the growth rates there by precinct. What you can also see based on the population number is that several precincts in Brookline now had more than 4,000 people in it, so they would need to shrink. Others were so low, they were outside of the 5% margin, so they would need to change as well in order for us to come into compliance, which is why we undertook this re-precincting process.
So before you move on to the next slide, Ben, I just want to draw my fellow board members' attention to the third column that says 2020 population. And I want you to really look at those numbers and see how close many of those numbers are to 4,000. Many are within 2, many are within 10. Precinct 5 is 245 people over what by law we are required. So these are things that were a little unexpected when we got the census results back. And factored into why the committee recommended a 17 precinct map. So I just wanted everyone to really look at this column as we go into the next couple of slides. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the Redistricting Committee this year was working on a very tight schedule. In normal years, we would be able to begin work in March and finalize our maps by June. Because of COVID and delays from the US Census, we were not able to begin our work until September and now have a deadline of December 4th to submit our maps. The committee had its first meeting September 16th and met every Thursday, except for one Thursday where there was a conflict with town meeting. We also, in the middle of our work, saw the state's proposed district maps, which changed some of our thinking to follow some of the district lines that cut through Brookline. The committee did hold a public forum that the public attended on November 10th, as well as taking public comment at every meeting. And on November 18th, right before town meeting, the committee voted on a recommendation that is now being presented to the select board tonight. There is a plan for the select board to vote on this map on December 30th in order for it to be submitted to the local elections district review committee at the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office by December 4th. And the effective date for these new maps is going to be December 31st, 2021, which means they will all be in effect for the May election next year. The committee early on decided to split into two working groups to try to expedite work. The working groups were a maps and numbers group that looked at some of the conversations around the number of precincts, as well as drew some of the maps that would be presented to the committee as a whole. And there was also an equity and access group that had conversations both about community engagement in the process and what kind of things the committee would like to prioritize in the maps that they drew. While there are committee members assigned to each of these working groups, a lot of committee members would attend the other meetings and would have a lot of good communication between all of them. And I know at those meetings as well, they took public comment and feedback on maps and ideas that were being discussed by the committee.
I just want to echo just how much work these committee members put in a very finite, short period of time. And there was a lot of cross-pollination, which is what I had envisioned when we decided to break into subgroups. I was worried that we wouldn't be able to get that many people to do additional meetings on top of a weekly 2-hour meeting. But to my pleasant surprise, not only were people willing to serve in one, but sometimes they would attend both subcommittee meetings.
So the committee had many different priorities and decision points that it had to make along the way. Early on in the process, we sent out a priorities survey to the committee and then followed up with another one about halfway through once we had some context of what we were working on. The responses came in from committee members. They were asked to rate priorities on a scale of 1 to 10. And the responses really broke into 3 tiers of things the committee would like to prioritize in the maps. Tier A were things such as polling site access, including polling locations being accessible to the disabled and the elderly, factoring in equity and equality in the maps, maximizing majority-minority precincts, and maintaining the integrity of neighborhoods and neighborhood associations. Tier B priorities were walkability to the polls, creating precincts around school districts, minimize changes to current precincts, maintain the same or a larger number of town meeting members, reassigning of residents to new precincts, geographic compactness, limiting the number of AB precincts, keeping precinct populations as close as possible to equal, and maintaining the same number of town meeting members in each precinct. And then the third tier, kind of lower priorities that the committee discussed, were factoring in registered voters versus non-voters, similar household income in one precinct, similar tenure and occupancy type in a precinct, the location of current town meeting members, and a similar type of home in a precinct.
And can you just, this is Miriam, can you just quickly give one line on AB precincts? I know what they are, but I think some people might not.
Certainly. So the state this year drew the state representative maps before we drew our map, which means that we knew where state representative lines are going to go. An AB precinct is a precinct that splits two state representative districts. So in even numbered years, when a state representative seat is up, say in precinct 1, a voter would go and some voters would vote in precinct 1 for representative A, some people would vote in precinct 1 for representative B. So we knew based on the numbers, there would be at least one AB precinct in Brookline. And there was a conversation in the committee about whether or not we should have more and how many was the appropriate number.
Great, thank you.
So there were three overarching decisions that the committee had to make about the precinct map. The first discussion was about the actual number of precincts. And there was a conversation of anything from 16 to 20 precincts. A lot of things factored into the decision to go to 17 precincts, including the ability to make future change, the ability to draw maps now that incorporate other priorities, and a desire to have the same or more town meeting members within Brookline. So the decision was made to stick to a 17 precinct recommendation. Chair Hamilton, I don't know if you wanted to expand more on that conversation.
I'll say maybe two things. If we had had more time, and my understanding is that almost all of the other efforts in prior redistricting committees, the community goes first and then the state goes second. If we had had more time and if we had gone first, I would have really considered a 20 precinct map. But given the time constraints, I think 17 really gives us some wiggle room to grow into the numbers that that I expect to see Brookline over the next 10 years grow into.
Another overarching decision point was about majority minority precincts. The state legislature made a concentrated effort to increase the number of majority minority precincts statewide. So following that lead, the committee prioritized creating 2 majority minority precincts, one of which focuses along the Commonwealth Avenue corridor and the other one along Gateway East in the Boylston Street corridor. I don't know if Dave Gayshaw wanted to expand a little more on majority minority precincts.
Sure, happy to. Clerk Hoffman, thank you. And I would just, good evening to all the board members. I would just add that the majority minority precincts, as the clerk said, is following the state house was a priority, but one among several, and was not the absolute final driving force behind drawing the lines we did. However, I think that the counterbalance to that is many committee members felt that this was a way to give more ability to the entirety of Brookline's population in all of its demographic diversity to select and elect a town meeting TMMs of its choice. Based upon the 2020 census, Brookline's approximately 65% residents who identify as both white race and non-Hispanic or Latino, and about 35% residents who identify as any combination of anything else. And so this was conceived, again, among other factors that drove lines that we drew, as one way to ensure that all of Brookline had proportionate opportunity to elect TMMs of their choosing.
Bernard.
Yeah, if this is a time to ask a question. So the term minority voters, I mean, what is the meaning of that? And for example, was there any effort to look at the percentage of Black voters and the percentage of Hispanic voters and percentage of Asian voters? Because when you do that, you get different issues, as well as you see some different consequences of just lumping everyone into this category of minority. For example, Precinct 13 is split at Reservoir Road. you may be dividing the Black population of upper and middle-class professional families that live in that area, and thereby diluting their vote. So I guess the question is, did you disaggregate the vague term minority to see what the real impact on specific minority populations are?
I will ask Dave to address that if it came up in the subcommittee.
It did, and thank you for that question, Select Board Member Green. It's absolutely the right one. Given the demographics of Brookline as a whole and the distribution of population within those demographic groups across Brookline, there were mathematical limitations that we had to work within. We ended up following, to the initial part of your question, we ended up following the state house's definition of a majority minority opportunity precinct or district, as the case may be, by using a percentage of total population per the census that identifies as anything other than white and non-Hispanic or Latino. Now, within that, within the group that identifies as any combination of anything else, as you aptly point out, there are many different parts and communities within that group of people. Only basically residents who identify as Asian or Asian American constitute just under 20% of the Brookline population. Every other demographic below that is constitutes single-digit percentages in terms of just the cascade of numbers. And so the only way to draw any precincts of the size within a 16 to 20 approximately precinct map that would yield any majority minority opportunity precincts required us to put all residents identifying as anything other than white and non-Hispanic or Latino into a single category for that purpose, but understanding that within that community of quote unquote minority in this context, as you say, there are many different communities of interest that may have some common and some divergent interests.
But the question really is, did you create unintended consequences in precinct 13?
So as a resident of precinct 13, I don't believe we did. There are the numbers of individuals who identify as any racial category on the census, and particularly any racial category other than either white or Asian, are small enough in the context of the overall Brookline population that their relative role in any precinct doesn't shift by more than a fraction of a percentage point to approximately maybe a percentage point in either direction outside of the majority minority opportunity precinct.
Is that true in precinct 13? That's my question.
Yes, I believe, I'll double check, but I believe that is true in precinct 13.
I'd like to see those numbers because I've seen numbers that suggest it's not. So.
Okay, John has his hand up.
Thanks very much. I'm actually going to save most of my questions and my comment until the end, but I did want to get this one in because it's on the same subject. Could someone answer, please, is the end result that actual majority minority precincts were created, or that we created some almost majority minority precincts?
They are under 50% white, non-Hispanic. Does that answer your question, John?
Well, yeah, no, not exactly. And I hope I'm not missing the point. But is the white non-Hispanic population larger than the minority, smaller or larger than the minority?
John, there were two precincts that I think were made majority minority precincts. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, but I'm asking about the use of the word majority. I heard Dave say majority minority opportunity, and my sense is that they might actually be close to being majority minority, but not exactly majority minority. And that's all I'm asking.
So a majority is over 50%. And these two precincts have under 50% white, non-Hispanic, meaning that those that identify as non-white, is it non-Hispanic, make up more than 50% of that precinct. Maybe Ben
okay.
or Dave can say it another way, but yes, it.
As Select Board Member Ben Skolnick, I might be able to clarify. Under the state's definition of a majority minority district or precinct, there are 2 precincts that are majority minority, meaning there are 2 precincts that are more than 50% people who identify as a minority population.
Okay, I thought I had seen some numbers that indicated that they were in the 40, mid 40, high 40%, but not above 50, but I'll take your word for it.
I think we had some trouble because you need to look at the total population, and unless you know exactly which column you're looking at, it can really skew the numbers.
And I have a slide later which breaks down those numbers for you as well. So the third decision point that guided a lot of the conversations on the committee was around AB precincts. An AB precinct poses challenges for voters, poses challenges for election workers. It was the advice of myself and my office that we limit to 3 AB precincts in order to minimize opportunities for mistakes and maximize accessibility for voters. And the committee agreed to stick with 3 AB precincts as the limit for the number of AB precincts in a map. So within the context and working with those guidelines for larger decisions, there were several precinct-specific decision points that were made and discussed by the committee, and ultimately each of these were voted on in order to come up with the final map. So the first decision point was about precinct 13 and 14. There were members of the committee who wanted to make precinct 13 a more compact precinct and also make precinct 14 more compact by taking some of the southern part of precinct 13, which on this map is the orange area all the way down along Route 9 towards the Newton border, and give that to precinct 14 in exchange for some of the blocks of precinct 14 along Beacon Street. The committee ended up discussing several different options, including a full swap of bringing precinct 13 all the way up essentially to Chestnut Hill Avenue and taking the relative number of blocks along Beacon Street. There was conversation about doing no swap at all and leaving precinct 13 as it is of the 2012 map, as well as what ended up being the compromise decision, which was to do a partial swap, which is what you see here.
So before you move on, Ben, can you just point out where Runkle School is, where precincts 12 and 13 currently vote?
Sure. If you see in the middle towards the right-hand side, the blue stars are all the existing polling locations. So there's a blue star between a 13 and a 12. That is the Runkle School.
So I know that this was compelling for me, and I think it was compelling for other folks on the committee. What you see here, if you were to take the green and spread it all the way to Route 9, Boylston Street, that would be the current precinct 13. And those folks are going arguably past Heath, which is the first blue star with 14 designated, and going to Runkle. So one of the priorities was to try to make precincts a little more geographically compact so that people were not traveling that far to their polling place.
And may I add something there, Madam Chair?
Of course.
I think also equally, if not more compelling for that reason, that the far northeastern corner of current precinct 14 along Beacon Street, which are the 3 blocks shown in green south of Beacon Street on the map in front of you, those are approximately 600 to 700 residents right now who live in precinct 14, who live right along the sea line and may or may not have easy access to cars. We don't know the numbers on that, but who right now have to make their way over across Fisher Hill past Runkle to Heath to vote, which may be even more difficult than folks in my neighborhood of precinct 13 to go the other direction.
And this was a very big topic of conversation 10 years ago. when the redistricting committee was asked to do the exact same exercise. Miriam.
So I don't know if you want to discuss this now or if you want to discuss it at the end, but I'm hoping we can talk about something in between the full and the partial to get more people at Heath. Like, I feel like we can still get more accessibility without too much disruption. So I just want to put that on the plate. And I have been following, as you know, very closely. So I don't know if you want to discuss it now or if you want to wait till it's all said and done.
Well, let's discuss what we might be able to do between this week. This week is the presentation. We'll also hear from members of the public who I think wanted to speak on this topic. And then we can talk about any tweaks that we may want to consider before we vote next week.
Great, thank you.
John?
Yeah, I couldn't resist the temptation of comment, so forgive me. I'm glad that we have the stars indicating the polling places. I assume the one to the utmost right is Driscoll. So we've got Driscoll, Runkle, Heath, and we are being offered the argument that because there are some people in 13 that are closer to Heath than they are to Runkle, we need to divide 13. If anybody will just look at the configuration of 13, 12, and 14 and the location of the schools, you will see people in 13 who are closer to Driscoll than to Runkle. You'll see people in 14 who are closer to Runkle than to Heath. And I haven't heard that offered as a justification for a similar division of those precincts. And the simple answer is there's no perfect answer in any of these precincts to a boundary which encompasses a precinct within which everyone is equally close to the polling place. It just doesn't happen. And there are polling places and situations like this all over town where a person's nearby school is not their polling place, and a more distant school is their polling place. But it seems only to have become a really urgent issue, for some reason never adequately explained as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to precinct 13.
That is an opinion. Just keep in mind the tiers of all the priorities. So no one priority won out every single time. And we had to build consensus among 17 people. So there was a lot of give and take. Miriam, and then Raul, and then Bernard.
Right, thank you. So I'll be the first to admit, John, that the perfect is the enemy of good, but that doesn't mean we don't try to do better. And I think that there's something to be said for getting as many people as possible to the closest polling station. I think that's important. That is a priority. That's what I'm talking about here. I'm not saying no swap. I actually, to be frank, I sit in the camp of no swap. I don't want to. I want to see the original lines, but there are a lot of people that are very upset about that because of how it breaks up with the TMMs. Obviously, I'm less concerned with that. I'm more concerned with accessibility. So that's where the swap conversation started to begin with. So let's call that out, okay? So fine. So what I want is more people with more accessibility. And I think a compromise between the full and partial still gets you more people to their closer polling station. And it doesn't upset the balance with the TMMs as a compromise. So you still get your compromise, but you get more people to a closer polling station. So, that's my priority.
Raul?
Yeah, well, I'll just say, all due respect to all of my colleagues, I'd love to get through the presentation. I think we were stopping for clarifying questions if it just made sense to ask at the moment, to say, oh, I just have a quick question about this particular slide. But I think I just checked ahead and there's quite a few more slides. I think it makes sense to see those through, write down our questions, and then have these, I think, important dialogues or debates afterwards. Plus, we have to hear from the public as well. So I just wanted to point that out.
Touche.
Thank you. Bernard?
I think I agree with Raul. I'll wait.
Okay. Ben, please resume.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the other conversations related to specific precincts was about Precinct 5. Precinct 5 was both one of the largest precincts, so it did need to shrink. It was also a precinct that was cut by one of these state rep lines between what is currently Ruth Balzer's district and what is currently Tommy Vitolo's district. The conversation was about whether or not Precinct 5 should tuck in on the north side right up to Route 9, or if it should be oriented farther to the south. It should include both sides of Chestnut Street, which is an area that there was a lot of conversation about. Ultimately, the committee decided to go with the southern option of Precinct 5, which would put the existing parts of Precinct 5 along Route 9 into a new Gateway East precinct, and would incorporate both sides of Chestnut Street and Sargent Estates into the current Precinct 5. A third area of conversation was the area north of Beacon Street, which was the existing precincts 1, 2, 8, and 9. A large part of this focus was about Precinct 2, which is one of the majority minority precincts focused along Commonwealth Avenue, as well as trying to maintain some of the existing shape of Precincts 1, 8, and 9, and where to put the newly created Precinct 17, which is in the middle of Coolidge Corner. And the third area of conversation was around Central Brookline, Precincts 3, 4, 6, and 7. In this map, the committee ended up deciding to make Precinct 4 a majority minority precinct focused around Gateway East and the Route 9 corridor. Precinct 3 stayed focused around the Lawrence School. Precinct 8 focused around the high school and Emerson Gardens. And a priority for Precinct 7 to incorporate all 3 of the Brookline Housing Authority properties, Sussman House, Kickham, and O'Shea, as well as Colonel Floyd, in the same existing precinct. So all of these conversations were had by the committee and votes were taken on some of them before they ultimately settled on a proposed map. That is the map that is being presented to you today. So this is the proposed map for Brookline's new precincts. It is a 17 precinct map. Every single precinct changes except for precinct 16, which stays the same as it was. And the new precinct 17 is located in Coolidge Corner. It's a Coolidge Corner centric precinct. There are 2 majority minority precincts, precinct 2 and precinct 4. And there are 3 AB precincts, precincts 5, 13, and 14. This is how the numbers break down for the precincts, population-wise. As you'll recall, each precinct must be within 5% of population. In this case, all precincts are within 5%. The largest deviations are precinct 10, which is 4.17% lower than the median, and precinct 14, which is 4.7% larger than the median. The 2 majority minority precincts you can see are precincts 2 and 4, which consist of precinct 2 is 50.07% minority, precinct 4 is 50.91% minority. So with that, that is the majority of the presentation on the maps. If the chair wishes and if there is time, I'm also happy to speak about potential polling locations, which could also be a conversation that we save until next week.
We'll talk about this tonight, but just, yeah, stay on this this slide for a moment. I promised John that we would consider a precinct, like a 16 precinct map, which we have ready to pull up if John really, really wants to see it. But let's open it to like an initial conversation with select board members. Then I'm going to try to rein it in so that Ben can address the polling locations. We'll open it up to public comment, and then we'll have a continued conversation amongst ourselves as to what we heard from the public. So Bernard?
Yeah, this may relate to some degree to what John wants to talk about, but I think we ought to be aware of the fact that when we talk about majority minority precincts here, we really are sort of covering over the fact that we're not talking about Black and Hispanic populations. We're talking in precinct 4, the overwhelming majority of minority is Asian. And while, you know, not taking anything away from that segment of the population, the fact of the matter is that Black and Hispanic residents basically are kind of ignored. Now, maybe there's not a solution to that, but we should be honest that when we're talking about minority precincts, we're really talking about something different than I think a lot of people in Brookline think we're talking about. And that is giving, partially giving, voting power to historic minorities, Black and Hispanic residents.
John.
Yes, I just wasn't certain what to say given the comment you just made. Am I to assume that if I want to say something about 16, I better say it now?
Sure.
Or can I wait?
Say it now. I want to take everybody's temperature about whether or not we're going to spend too much time on a 16 precinct map.
Sure. I'm happy to do that. And if Ben wouldn't mind putting up the 16 precinct map, I'd appreciate it very much. Because it's a beautiful thing. I'm sure everyone will agree, maybe, or maybe not. I'm going to stipulate a couple of things. I don't think there's 3 votes on the select board for this map. Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. But if there are not 3 votes on the select board for this map, and the alternative is the 17 precinct map that we've just looked at, I will happily vote for the 17 precinct map. I watched the meetings of this redistricting committee. I was really impressed with the work that they did. And I am wholly in agreement with the priorities that led to the 17 precinct map. At the same time, I think that if we really look at the analytics of the 16 precinct map that you're looking at versus the 17 precinct map, with a couple of exceptions, I think the 16 precinct map comes out ahead. And I'll quickly try to sort of explain that. My objective in asking for there to be a 16 precinct map was that as close as the numbers were, and they were close, Heather mentioned this at the beginning of this presentation, that there are precincts that almost by some miracle were within like 1 or 2 population of the population limit for the precinct. But the fact of the matter is 1 or 2 is good enough as long as it's, on the right side of the limit. And nothing will change that. The census for 2020 is the census that governs the precincts until there's a census for 2030. And if the census found that the population was within the limit, it was within the limit. And people can say, well, yeah, but over 10 years, we might exceed that population. Well, we might or we might not. We might lose population. There are people who think the 2020 count was based on an overcount. I'm not going to try to predict what happens to population. And by the way, it's irrelevant if the population grows. That's why we do redistricting, every 10 years to reflect changes in population. So if it changes, that'll be reflected in the next redistricting. But for now, it is possible, and it's been shown, that you can do a redistricting or re-precincting of Brookline that leaves, Ben will have to correct me if I've got my numbers wrong, but Ben, is it 8 or 7 precincts that don't need any change at all? I don't know if Ben wants to jump in on that.
That sounds correct.
Yeah, I think it might have been 7. 9 need to be changed. 7 can be left alone. So, just on a basis of minimizing disruptions, and I'm talking about disruptions that matter to voters. Sure, they matter to incumbent town meeting members, but they also matter to voters. Voters get used to their precincts. They get used to voting where they vote. They, are, for the most part, seemingly happy because guess what? I haven't had anybody complain to me about precinct 13, which happens to be my precinct. I hear reasons given why precinct 13 might not be perfect, but I don't hear a groundswell of voters. And in fact, John Doggett, my neighbor, went to the trouble of gathering signatures and got incredible number of signatures of people saying, please leave our precinct alone. So starting from leaving them alone is not a bad idea because of those reasons. And it is perfectly possible and reasonable to do. There's nothing that says we can't leave precincts alone. Here's another reason to leave them alone. 13 was carved out as it is, as being in Kevin Honen's state representative district. If we had left it alone, there would be no need for there to be a so-called AB, voting treatment of precinct 13 when it comes to, you walk into the voting booth, which state rep are you voting for, this one or that one? By now dividing the precinct, we're going to end up with some people represented by Kevin Honan, in one precinct, and in the same precinct, some people represented by a different representative, if I've got that right, because of the way the state rep line was drawn prior to our redrawing 13. So I think if you measure 16 precinct map versus 17 on the basis of the AB situations that are created, on the basis of lines that are changed in ways that change voters' customary habits as to what precinct they're in and where they vote, and if you also look at simply deviation from the mean, I'm going to guess that 16 has a lesser degree of deviations from the mean than the 17, because we were working within very narrow constraints because the populations were so close to the limit to begin with. So I know when I worked on this that it was very hard to get the numbers to work out, but they did, and they were within a very narrow range so that the population variation from one precinct to the next was not at all great. So I'm going to guess that this is a better map in terms of deviation from the mean. So I just think we got to be consistent in how we decide these issues. And if 16 proves to be better on the very criteria that are being used to justify 17, then people should seriously consider sticking with this 16 precinct version.
So before I recognize Raul, I'll just clarify, this map has no minority majority precincts.
I'll take Ben's word or your word for that, but I think Bernard has made a pretty good point on that issue as well.
Raul.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, we had a committee that discussed and debated all of these issues and came to what I think is a unanimous conclusion to present the model that we had shown to us previously. It's not that I wouldn't necessarily support changes to that if I thought there was a significant and compelling reason to do so, but I'm not eager to start, completely revisiting, as this does, the work of that committee at this point. If there was some small tweak or something like that, this is dramatically different than what the committee that we asked to do this work came up with.
And I would like to respond to some of John's comments. It's unfortunate that the state went first this year, and they carved out precinct 13 and put it into Honan's district. But I'm hopeful that 10 years from now, when they see that we adjusted that line and hopefully we go first again, that the state will follow whatever we decide to do in that part of town. So there are two things that you brought up. The first, do no harm concept. And then I guess the very compelling reason why I I find myself not able to support a precinct 16 map. John, did you want to respond to something before I address these two things?
Only very quickly, just to maybe correct an impression. This is not my map. This was produced by the work of the committee as an alternative, keeping in mind that there were many maps created so that the committee could study all of them and choose. And this is one of them. It's it's not my map. It's created by the work of the committee. I just thought I would make that point.
Okay, fair point. I did ask the committee to consider 16, 17, and 20. And so maps were created with those variations, and through a lot of talking and a lot of hard work through the committee, 17 came out as something that a lot of people saw the benefits of. And so, okay, the first do no harm. Let me speak to that really quickly. I've tried to stay on top of some of the arguments for this, and I think it breaks down into two categories. The first do no harm, I think, whether it was implicit or explicit, was really geared towards preserving town meeting members, which the committee chose not to rank very high on its list of priorities. And the second bucket, so you can't help but understand, what's come before. So John and I talked a couple weeks ago, and he informed me that it was actually in 1970 that we went from 12 precincts to 16. And ever since then, the committee has always decided to try to keep the map very similar to the map that existed before. And so you kind of become an anthropologist, like finding out why certain pockets have tried to stay together and why lines, look the way that they do. And so that could fall into the first do no harm. But the reason I don't think either of those things hold now is because when you looked at that slide in the beginning, where our numbers are at the upper limit, the entire premise of this exercise is driven by the fact that in a democratic society, we have equal representation. And I cannot support a map that I know within a matter of months will not be equally representing people in my town. We know where some of the projects are being permitted. We know where the growth is likely to happen. And this is a once every 10-year exercise. We need to plan for the future, not just now. So that is the reason why I think this committee saw the logic of going to 17 right now. Any other questions before we hear from the public? Miriam.
I'll try to keep it brief, I promise. First, I would say that I really have to thank the committee. I've stayed abreast of all your work. It's really phenomenal, thoughtful, detailed. I just really appreciate it, especially because I didn't want to do it. So thank you. And I would just say that, the do no harm principle in medicine is a very important one, but I think the do no harm principle in politics upholds the status quo. And I'm not in favor of upholding the status quo. I don't do this job to uphold the status quo. I do this job to move things forward, to make things better. And, to the point of the minority and majority precincts, I think it's very clear that these are not completely black and brown precincts. We don't have those numbers in Brookline, but they are predominantly non-white, non-Hispanic. And I think that is a step in the right direction. John, like you and Bernard, and sure, I've been following along very closely. And my conclusion is that 17 precincts is the right number. And I support that. And I support pretty much all of the work. It is a attention, and I think keeping the priorities ever in front of you of accessibility. How do we get people to the closest polling station? Frankly, I don't like how precinct 13 is, and I have a very different, we're both in 13, John, but I have a lot of constituents who dislike having to go to Runkle to vote, who are my neighbors, right? We live across from Heath. So, you know, I hear a very different framing than you do, which is perfectly appropriate. We, you know, we have a big district, we have people with different tensions and needs. So for me, the priority is to get my constituents to the closest polling station to make voting easier for them. That is also your priority, I imagine, but we're just hearing from very different groups of people, right? So I want to be very thoughtful about that. I want to make sure we're not gerrymandering in any way. I think it's very easy to think about, you know, how we keep TMMs in their precincts. I don't want that to be a part of my thinking. And I think the committee has done a really fabulous job with this. So as Heather knows, my only concern is trying to maybe find a middle ground between the full and the partial swap, so that we get even more people voting at closer polling stations. But otherwise, I just think and even with that, I think it's a great job. So thank you. That's where I stand.
Great. I'll just say one thing about the MMOPs before we take public comment. And that is, I see this as an experiment, as an opportunity. That's why we're calling it an opportunity. In 10 years, we'll know whether or not our thesis holds. And so that committee will have that much more information to make decisions at that point regarding populations that don't identify as white, non-Hispanic. If we don't do anything differently, we won't have that information 10 years from now. So let's take public comment. I think Arthur Conquest signed up in advance.
I'm promoting Arthur Conquest to a panelist.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. I pressed the wrong button. Arthur Wellington Conquest III, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6. Last week, as a result of my attending an ARPA meeting with a range of individuals from a variety of organizations in Brookline, I struck up a conversation with an individual who was very interested in the work the Redistricting Committee is engaged in. I'm always very curious, and as a result, this person and I began exchanging emails about two new precincts in particular. One that included Egmont Housing Development near Commonwealth Avenue, and the second one that has High Street and Kent Street housing developments included in it. First point of correction is that using the term minority majority, I've been told, is illegal terminology. For the umpteenth time, I'm not a lawyer, but someone in town council's office needs to verify if the town is opening itself to being sued for using the term. As I was told officially, the official term is to identify those precincts should be renter versus owner. I'm only bringing this to your attention for you to check. Just because the Massachusetts State House uses the term, it doesn't give Brookline license to do the same. Second, by and large, the renters are economically disadvantaged Black, Latinx, Asians, and people of color residing in the developments. The owners are mostly white in private housing. I've resided in Brookline since 1983 and became a town meeting member in 1993. If I walk down the street or knock on a door in precinct 6, even today, say to drop a campaign flyer off, I'd have ugly, uncomfortable experiences most of you wouldn't imagine. And I've mentioned this to Rudolph, who's on that committee, in a conversation that I had with him this past Saturday.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to skip the specific examples. You are setting Black and Latinx residents up for failure unless you tackle this ugly disease of white supremacy before it damages this grand experiment. It's foolish to believe that, quote, Brookline's overall culture is not racist. Thank you.
Devin, is there anyone else that has signed up?
Not at this time.
So I'd like to turn it back over to committee members, and Devin, certainly let me know if anybody messages you that they would like to speak from the public. Any other comments or discussion? Just keep in mind that we are supposed to start our joint convention with the library trustees very shortly, and we are not voting tonight. We are voting next week. John.
Real quick, Ben messaged a correction. Thank you very much, Ben. So the 16 precinct map has 6 precincts that are left alone. The 17 precinct map, as Ben said earlier, has just 1 precinct that is left alone. I wanted to simply ask Arthur, I appreciated his comments very much, but I didn't hear him say whether he thinks the 17 precinct map or the 16 precinct map for that matter, do damage to the interests of renters versus homeowners. I'm just wondering, where he comes down on the issue of how to do these maps.
Devin, is he still here?
It appears he's no longer in the attendee list.
Okay, so I guess you should follow up with him between now and next week.
Sure.
Any other comments by select board members before we put a pin in this and then take it up next week? Bernard?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the committee provides some additional information for us. For example, breakdown of Black, Hispanic, Asian individuals in different precincts. I think that's critical information. I don't think we can solve this problem, but we at least need to go into it eyes wide open. So,
Okay.
and specifically precinct 13, which Dave Gates said he has the numbers on.
So Ben or Dave, will you be able to communicate with Bernard offline to answer his questions?
Yes, Madam Chair, I can send the select board members an email which breaks down each precinct by different demographic statistics.
Great, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, if it's helpful, I think I can answer Select Board Member Green's specific question live if you'd like, or happy to
Oh
do it offline.
yes, let's do it while we have a captive audience.
So Select Board Member Green, I looked back at what I think is your question in terms of the absolute numbers. And so the current iteration of precinct 13 and the currently in force for the last 10 years up to now map is 68.7% identifying as white non-Hispanic, and then approximately 6.3% Hispanic, 3.5% Black or African American, and 20.7% identifying as Asian. And then there are sub 1% groups of other demographic categories. So that's 68.7% white and non-Hispanic, approximately 6% Hispanic, approximately 3.5% Black, approximately 21% Asian. The map that the committee recommended that's in front of the select board now, the modified version of precinct 13 with the partial swap would be a little bit less white, would be by about a percentage point, would be identically an identical proportion identifying as Hispanic or Latino, would be almost an identical portion within a 1/10 of a percentage point identifying as Black, would be slightly higher percentage Asian, and otherwise largely identical. So it's just slightly less white and slightly more identifying as Asian versus the current map if you're just looking at precinct 13.
Hey, could you send that that information to us?
Yeah.
I note that unfortunately, 6.5% Black is double almost the number or percentage of Black residents in the whole town of Brookline. So there's some significant concentration there, and I think we should look at. Also, if we have absolute numbers, I think that would be helpful too.
Happy to send that data to you, Select Board Member Green, and I apologize if I misspoke. It's approximately 6.5% Hispanic and approximately 3.5% Black or African American.
Oh, I thought you said 6.5.
No.
Okay, sorry.
My apologies.
John.
Yeah, just one more question here. So again, this has been a terrific presentation, and I do want to thank everyone for it. But it is labeled on our agenda as a presentation. Are we going to have a hearing, a public hearing on this before we vote?
Well, the committee held a public forum that counted as the public hearing, and that was held not last week, but the week before on a Wednesday. And we've gotten a number of public comments, not only through the survey that we put out, but at a lot of our meetings and then at that forum.
I guess I just would like to go on the record as favoring that we have a select board hearing on this before we vote on it. That's my opinion.
Well, tonight was that opportunity because by state law, we have to vote next week.
But it's not too late to get a hearing on the agenda for next week, right?
I mean, we could say the word hearing, and I always take comments by the public. But if they really want to influence our decision, I think this might be the last week to get their thoughts in. I don't know too many select board members that will feel comfortable voting on something that we're changing on the fly, minutes before we vote.
I'm just struck by the fact that this has been a subject of very lively, exchanges on the town meeting member listserv and in other places too. And I'm a little surprised that only one person showed up, and I think maybe a hearing, would be in order just to make sure that everybody who wants to have a say on this before it becomes, the law of the land for the next 10 years gets a chance to be heard.
We will put the words hearing on our agenda for next week before we vote.
Great.
I am hoping that the reason we didn't have 30 people signed up is because this committee worked very, very hard and worked in a way that actually re-inspired me to keep going. It was very difficult to lead this effort, and it was not clear that we were going to get consensus, but everybody really listened to each other and understood what other people cared about and tried to find common ground. And it was it's something I'm incredibly proud to be part of.
As you
Raul?
should be, as you should.
Raul?
Agreed. And I would just encourage members of the public, because we have gotten a number of emails to this effect, and please do reach out to us. But I want members of the public to think before they hit send on that email. Is what I'm recommending gerrymandering? And we've gotten some emails where people are specifically stating that this would disproportionately impact certain current elected officials, town meeting members. The process here, and I'm glad to see that deprioritized in the process of the committee. We should not be drawing a electoral boundaries to benefit incumbents in any way, shape, or form, or be concerned with the fact that someone might have to run for their seat again or be moved to a different precinct. We just simply cannot do that. That is textbook gerrymandering. And so before you send any suggestions to that effect, please make sure that you think about and look up the definition of gerrymandering and make sure that you're not recommending to that to us, because it can't possibly happen. That's not something that members of this board can consider in our deliberations and ultimately our vote.
Are there
Well,
any other comments before we move to the joint convention with the library trustees?
Yeah.
Bernard.
Yeah, I hope that the intent was not to, Raul's comment was not to discourage people from coming up with ideas that may be dumb ideas or not perfect ideas. I mean, I think we want to hear from people, and even if the result after a deep analysis is that a proposal results in gerrymandering, we still want to hear that. We'll make that decision. As to whether it's a valid position, but people should feel free to state their opinion without fear of having to analyze it for gerrymandering. So,
Heather, if I can just respond, thank you for clarifying, Bernard, that it was not my intent to discourage anyone from providing whatever ideas in whatever fashion they want to us. Just a little bit of helpful guidance to understand before they take the time to produce a new map or anything like that would take significant amount of time to do, or whatever it is that they understand what the rules of the road are and the limitations are. But sure, send us whatever you want.
So I understand that Susan Park wants to make a comment, and then I'll recognize Miriam, and then we really do need to move on. So Susan,
Hi.
you have
Yes,
up to
hi.
3 minutes.
Okay, yes. Hi, my name is Susan Park. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 2. And I'd like to thank the Redistricting Committee for all the time and the effort they've spent in drawing up the maps. And when I, looked to see where the new precinct would be, Precinct 17, and then just trying to figure out which precinct I would be moving to. I guess I was just concerned because I'm trying to understand the minority majority precinct, which is Precinct 2. And being Asian myself, I mean, I guess I call myself Asian American, but I am Asian. And so I guess I was just a little bit confused about Precinct 2, which is where I am now, and that's going to be considered the minority majority districts, but then I'm going to be moved to 17. And I guess I just wanted to understand that a little bit more.
Understand what exactly? That you would be in a different precinct?
Well, what's the point in calling the pre-existing Precinct 2 the new majority minority district? Like, what's the point in having that labeled that?
Well, we could renumber the precincts however way that we wanted. People tend to associate these precinct numbers with a certain area of town. I guess I'm struggling to understand what your question
I guess
is.
she wants to understand, what the point of majority minority districts are in the context of Brookline, as opposed to, Boston or someplace. I mean, it sounds like what you're saying, Susan.
That's correct, Bernard. Thank you for that clarification. Yep, that's exactly my question.
So,
especially since majority minority districts are designed to prevent racial voter dilution. And is that the issue here in Brookline?
Well, we will know once we do it, because we'll have 10 years worth of election data to draw from. It's hard to say, like right now in Brookline, because we don't have them. But this gives us an opportunity to not only better understand, because we'll have data to look back on, but also there's a theory that this will make it even easier for minorities to run for town meeting. I don't know whether or not that's going to prove to be truer than it is today, but again, in 10 years, we'll have some data to look back on.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm, just because I guess I consider myself a minority, even though I was born and raised in the United States. But it's just, I think it's just very strange to call a precinct a minority majority precinct. And that's just my opinion. When I heard about it, I just had a few question marks, like some red flags, because I mean, I don't say
Susan,
that.
Susan,
Yeah.
we really do need to move on. Miriam has her hand up. I'm happy to talk to you more offline about this.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I just wanted to share my comments and thank you for giving me the time to do that.
Of course.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You too. Miriam.
Thank you. This will be quick, and my apologies if I missed this, but what was the vote for the committee on what was presented to us today?
Ben, can you confirm? I think it was unanimous. I just don't remember exactly how many people were there at the end, because we had to change our time that we were meeting at 7 p.m. on Thursdays, and because of town meeting, we had to meet at 5.
And unanimous is a fine answer too. Just
I think it was unanimous.
Dave is
Yes,
shaking.
Dave
his
is
head, yes.
excellent.
Madam Chair,
Okay,
All right, thank you.
Madam Chair, it was 13 to nothing to nothing.
great. Okay. So thank you very much, Dave and Ben, for all of your assistance on this effort and all of your hard work.
Have a good evening. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Okay. So how are we gonna do this? Devin, do you just start promoting all of the library trustees? Start with Michael Burstein.
We actually have a couple of board and commission interviews prior to.
Oh,
the
I totally
convention.
forgot. Okay, thank you. I have not been paying attention. Okay, so, oh man, give my apologies to Michael that we are that far behind. So yes, we have board and commission interviews, Karen Flannery for the Brookline Village Parking Benefit District Advisory Board.
Hi. I'm going to do this very briefly. I'm a 30+ year homeowner and in Precinct 5, existing Precinct 5, a user of the village through all that time, both town buildings and private businesses. I'm currently a small business owner here in the village. I own one of the co-owners of Andamart Studios on 17 Station Street. I've participated in the Brookline Village Business Association. I'm on the committee to help create a mass cultural district here in the village. And I helped coordinate this October's Brookline Open Studios here on Station Street.
Great, that was brief. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any questions for Karen? How did you come to learn of the vacancies on this particular committee?
Jillian from the Brookline Arts approached me about it. Yes, yes. And we've talked about it and I said, yes, I'd be happy to do this.
Great. Miriam.
Thank you. I'm just curious about what do you hope to accomplish on the committee? What do you like that they're doing? Where would you like them to go? You can keep it brief, but just some vision.
I don't have any particular things that I want to accomplish other than, I have no agenda for it other than making sure that pedestrian issues are taken into account. But as a business owner, I also see the need for parking for our members and people that come to our shows and things like that are always saying how difficult it is to park in the area. So I just want to look at it sort of comprehensively and maybe have some insight from there.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Bernard.
Yeah, quickly, you seem to have an artistic bent. I'd be interested in having a couple thoughts from you on how you'd incorporate that into the work of the board.
Well, one of the things of interest is bringing some art to the village, and in the way, whether it's murals on walls and talking to business owners and building owners about increasing sort of some artwork in the village, as well as maybe something for the business owners to do something with their businesses themselves. I don't know if you're familiar with Serenade Chocolates, but over the past couple of years, they've had amazing displays at the holidays in her windows, and had people come and just say, thank you for doing that. And so trying to get something within the businesses so that it's a little more, I don't know, interesting. There's more interest, visual interest in the different businesses in the village.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you so much for your interest. There is at least one vacancy, and we will be making a decision in the next couple of weeks.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for making yourself available tonight.
Take care.
Okay, next up is Neil Wyshynski, who is interviewing for a position vacancy on the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Howdy.
Mr. Wyshynski, if you could try to keep it under 90 seconds, and then we will open it up to questions by select board members.
Well, I'm known to all of you probably, and a particular focus of mine has been zoning and land use during my service on the select board, and prior to that on the advisory committee, and subsequently to that on the advisory committee. You should know that I've resigned, or as of the end of town meeting, I will have resigned from the advisory committee. So I'm looking for some new stuff to do. And my particular focus has been on economic development and actually affordable housing. Having grown up in subsidized housing, I realize the importance of trying to keep Brookline as affordable as we can and increase the supply of affordable housing. And my focus on the, if you were so inclined to appoint me, would be to fair and equitable administration of the town zoning bylaw. And I could bring a side of me you haven't seen, which is experience administering complex laws. I spent a career in the federal government administering some very, very complex laws. So with that, I'll open it to questions.
Raul.
Okay, thanks, Heather and Neil. Good to see you here. I'm also glad to hear, that was actually one of my concerns. One of my few concerns going in was, when we have people on multiple boards and so many positions and making room for others. So I'm glad to hear that you'll be sort of shifting your eye toward this if appointed by the board. I guess my one question would be, when we're above again the 10% threshold around related to 40B, what are the primary ways that that we're going to be able to support the development of truly affordable housing in Brookline?
Well, first of all, the ZBA doesn't make policy; it administers policy. That said, one of the things the ZBA does have control over is 40B permitting, and just because we can say no doesn't necessarily mean we can say no. And 40B is in reality just another permitting tool that gives us flexibility. And there can be and should be friendly 40Bs. And that I know is a controversial topic, but I guess dealing with controversy is something I've done in the past. The other thing we could do is as we're negotiating, especially larger projects, making sure that we include as large a contribution to the town's affordable housing stock, either preferably on site, but sometimes on site doesn't work. For example, what we did up at Newberry College with the well tower development, we negotiated the largest contribution to the town's housing trust fund in its history, which is enabling the Colonel Floyd project to go forward. So, and as I said, that would be a particular focus of mine.
Right. Appreciate that, Neil. I think my first meeting after being elected to the board was, I know it was the morning after the election. I got sworn in at 8 a.m. and I was in a meeting with you and the new relative to Newberry College. So
yeah, that was an exciting time. Yeah, that was an exciting project.
Well, thanks for your work on that.
John.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Neil, for stepping up to the plate again and to extend the metaphor. I was going to ask a question comparable to my colleague, Mr. Fernandez's question. Do you see the ZBA as, to use the phrase, calling balls and strikes, or is it something more than that? And if it's something more than that, what would you describe as your philosophy? And finally, can you just explain to people what a friendly 40B is?
Sure. Well, the second part is the easier part. As I said, 40B is can be just another permitting vehicle, and a friendly 40B is one that where the ZBA says yes, and we have a general consensus that this is the right thing to do. For example, Colonel Floyd, expanding the Colonel Floyd housing development, that is a friendly 40B. There's general consensus that it's the thing to do, and I think there are opportunities for that in other parts of town. The ZBA, I think, is mostly a balls and strikes board. It has to operate within the context of the zoning bylaw, so that's our legal constraints. But within that, there's discretion. So there's discretion on, does a particular project fit into the neighborhood? That's a judgment call. And I think to a large extent, we have to listen to comments that we get from the public, but we also have to layer in our own personal conception of whether or not a project fits into the neighborhood, and public comment at the ZBA and the planning board can get very, very emotional, and we have to kind of cut through the emotion and try to lower the temperature as much as we can, and listen to folks, and not only listen to folks, but I think hear folks. Hearing is just as important as listening. So you're muted, John.
Thanks for that answer. Sorry.
Any other questions for Neil? Seeing none, thank you so much. We won't be voting at this meeting, but we will vote at another meeting.
See you all.
Thank you for your interest. Okay, now the last item on our agenda is a joint convention with the library trustees to interview candidates for a current vacancy on the library trustee board. Michael Burstein, who is the chair of the library trustees, I'm going to turn it over to you to run this joint convention.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. I am honored to take the role of chairing the joint convention. The first thing I would like to request is Could we please promote all of the library trustees who are present to panelists so that we have them here and ready to vote when the time comes to take the vote? Thank you, Devin. I'm starting to see them. My understanding is that there should be 10 of the trustees here tonight. I want to make sure that those 10 are present. And my understanding is we do have all 5 select board members here.
We do. Let me just take a roll call of my board to enter into the joint convention. And then, Michael, I'll completely defer to you after that. So, select board members, this is a roll call in order to enter a joint convention with the library trustees. Bernard?
Yes.
Raul?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you, Michael.
And thank you. I'm going to take a roll call of the trustees who I believe to be present. Michael Burstein is here. Reggie Healy.
Here.
Kristen Hung.
Here.
Karen Livingston.
Here.
Carol Lowy.
Here.
John Margolis.
I'm here.
Coenia Martin Page.
Here.
Matthew Shakespeare.
Present.
Judith Vanderkay.
Here.
And Sasan Zelka.
Here.
Let the record show that trustee Chris Chenuselkit is not here tonight. So we have 10 library trustees, 5 select board members. So a vote on the filling the vacancy of the joint convention does, actually I'm getting ahead of myself, will require 8 votes, a majority. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Library Director Sarah Slyman, who is here, although technically not a member of the joint convention, but of course, obviously, probably the most important person of all of the trustees and director if you put us all together. The point of the joint convention is to fill the vacancy that in the board of trustees that was caused by the resignation of Gary Jones. It was very sad for us that Gary resigned and then sadly passed away that very same day we received the resignation letter. We have 6 applicants to this to fill this vacancy. What I see that Devin has already started. What I'm going to ask Devin to do is, in order as we approach each applicant, to promote them to panelists so they can participate, and then to send them back to the waiting room. The first applicant is Laurie Hawthorne, and each applicant has been given the question in advance. So we'll have 2 minutes to answer the question that is being presented. So Laurie, and I would ask each applicant if they are comfortable doing so, to feel free to give their pronouns before answering the question. My pronouns are he and him. Ms. Laurie Hawthorne, the question for you for 2 minutes is, what will you bring to the Board of Trustees if appointed?
Thank you. Laurie Hawthorne, she, her, hers. I would actually bring over 10 years library HR experience. I do have experience working with library leadership to create multi-year goals and objectives. I've worked with building operations and emergency health and safety on library renovations. I have and would bring over 20 years labor relations experience working with and fostering collegial working relationships with library unions and organizers. I have knowledge of creating and organizing diversity residency programs as one way of building candidate pipelines. I also have expertise in creating and facilitating programs, workshops, and trainings that promote equity, diversity, inclusion, anti-racism. I have knowledge working with various library systems, and a few years ago, I was part of the ALMA implementation team. I have a lot of expertise in library recruitment and onboarding, and also developing and reviewing library policies and procedures. I'm currently an appointed member of the American College and Research Libraries National Diversity Alliance. I attend library conferences annually, and I actively participate in library listservs, really to stay abreast of library trends. And if appointed, I would bring what I've learned and share that with the trustees. I bring sound understanding of how to create equitable and inclusive library spaces, services, policies, and collections. And finally, I would bring lots of advocacy. I want people to know that libraries are just more than a reference desk or a stack of books. I really want people to know that libraries are a welcoming space for everyone and that everyone is represented. Thank you.
Thank you. I wish to also point out that all of the applicants, all 6, have filed applications that were given to the trustees and the select board. And it occurs to me the last time we did this, that because the trustees already had a chance to interview the candidates outside of this, I did want to give the select board a chance to ask any one follow-up question they wish. If there's any select board member who would like to ask one short follow-up question of Laurie Hawthorne, please raise your hand. Okay, I see none. So thank you, Ms. Hawthorne, and we will go to the next candidate, Jeremy Dela Cruz. I see Jeremy Dela Cruz. Jeremy, as same question, if comfortable, please give your pronouns, and then please answer the question, what will you bring to the Board of Trustees if appointed?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeremy Dela Cruz, he, him, his. I am a Brookline resident and town meeting member for Precinct 10. And I would hope to contribute to the Library Board of Trustees, a diverse perspective as a millennial, person of color, and member of the LGBTQ+ community. I would aim to work to ensure that the library continues to be a welcoming place for all perspectives, all voices, and newcomers, especially. As a newcomer to Brookline myself, I've enjoyed using the services that the library has and recognizing its role as a community space for the town. I can also contribute a consulting and project management background. I understand kind of the importance of tracking progress, tracking action items, following up, and making sure that projects are undertaken efficiently and effectively. So really have a bias for action and making sure that things happen when you serve on a board. So I serve on a national alumni board at the University of Notre Dame for the Asian Pacific alumni. So I have kind of that advocacy background and background in creating creative programming for current students in that role. I can also contribute my fundraising background as a nonprofit consultant who partners with nonprofits for strategic fundraising initiatives. It was really great the last few weeks to touch base with different trustees as well as Kate at the Library Foundation to learn more about all the entities within the library ecosystem. And I hope as a trustee to facilitate better and kind of improved, intentional, meaningful interactions between the trustees and the foundation to create a culture of philanthropy that in the community so that the library can be empowered and able to advance its mission within the community through funds from the public and other activities and other initiatives like that. So
thank you. And I would like to offer any select board member wish to ask one follow-up question. Yes, Ms. Hamilton.
How did you come to hear of the vacancy?
I heard about it through a few channels. So I saw kind of the Facebook postings about it, also on Instagram, and then also on WhatsApp. So a few channels through learning about the vacancy.
Okay, thank you very much. I would ask to have the next candidate. Oh, was there somebody else? Oh, okay. I would like to ask to have the next candidate, Steve Flaherty. Steve Flaherty has been promoted. And if you could please go off mute, give your pronouns if comfortable with that, and please answer the question, what will you bring to the Board of Trustees if appointed?
Thank you, Steve Flaherty. I go by he, him, his. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with the select board as well as the trustees again. Thank you for the time. If I was given this opportunity, I think the first thing I would bring to the group is my love of the library, which may sound a little bit normal for everyone here who would want to be a trustee, but since I was a child, I've always loved the library in my hometown of Weymouth, and as a father here in the town of Brookline, it's a place we go every week. It's a place that I went to when I was laid off, and I would work from the library on the desks and see who was there. And it's a place I still go to now when I have all the time I can, using all the different services there. I'd bring that perspective, as well as my perspective as a youth organizer and a community organizer, and in my role running a youth group where I grew up in Weymouth with hundreds of teenagers, and having to understand how we can work with the community to try to create diverse programming and to try to make sure that we're representing the community as a whole. I would love to use the library, its grounds in particular, and the spaces in the library to have creative programming and have not just, I think as one of the other applicants said, the library be seen as a reference desk or a place where you pick up books, but instead to see the library as a continually growing and active place, which is what I see it as. And I think that the library has done an amazing job in Brookline of doing that, but we can always continue to do more and to serve the community. I would bring my experience in fundraising and innovating on how to fundraise, which is something that over the last few years in particular, as we move to a more remote type of communication, has been increasingly difficult since we're not always together to be able to rub elbows and talk to one another. That is something that I do quite frequently. And I'd also bring from my work in hospital administration what I think is important, and having read a number of the minutes for the trustees over the last few months, is my work in managing, recruiting, onboarding, and then retaining staff, and how we can do that in a more effective way as we deal with the way people are looking at the work-life balance within the constraints we now have of either working remotely or working in this pandemic-affected environment. I think that those things would be some of the more important aspects I could bring immediately to the group. Lastly, I would bring to this my real interest in some of the committees that the library trustees have going for themselves, which in particular, how they look at the grounds and using the facilities.
You've gone a little past 2 minutes. Can you give just one list the committees you're interested in?
And that would be it. Yeah, just the grounds, the buildings and committee and grounds committee and the programming committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does any member of the select board have a follow-up question they would wish to ask? Okay, I do not see any. So thank you. If we could please promote the next candidate to panelist, Rick Fredkin. Okay, and Mr. Flaherty can go back to the waiting room. Thank you. And so the same questions for Rick Fredkin. If comfortable, please give your pronouns and then answer the question, what will you bring to the Board of Trustees if appointed?
Thank you. Rick Fredkin, he, him, his. A brand new town meeting member for Precinct 14. So it's good to finally, to the select board and the trustees, good to communicate and actually talk. As a lifelong continuing learner, I truly believe in what libraries bring to the community and its residents. What I bring as a potential trustee is my energy, effort, and expertise. I was told of the opening from someone I know, and they thought I would be a good person. I love the town of Brookline. Brookline is my lifelong home, and where I can be of use, I'm happy to be involved. Anything I do, I try and bring my best effort to it. I like to be productive, and I want to provide value. I would, as a trustee, bring my life experience. My background is in technology and business. I started professionally in technology at the age of 13 as a 9-to-5 employee, and have a widely varied career and experiences that are fairly unique. My professional career has led me to a company, Eduporting, based in Newton. It's a company I founded. I'm the CEO, and we bring STEM tools and resources to educators nationally. As part of my company at Eduporting, we work regularly with library systems across the country. Our work revolves around the evolution of what it means to be a library and its offerings to their communities. I have experience from being on numerous boards over the years, most revolving around youth and education. Currently, I'm on for the Museum of Science Boston. I'm Museum of Science Advisor, Blue Wing Technology Task Force, a new wing that they're opening, and the Service Engagement and Enrichment Committee co-chair. These, with my professional experiences, are to say that I have a wealth of relevant experience and contacts to draw on that would aid my role as a trustee. This comes from around Brookline, the greater Boston ecosystem, and all around the United States. If I became one of the Brookline Library trustees, I'd probably be most useful in discussions around how the Brookline Library continues to move forward and evolve in the 21st century, how it can bring more value to its users and residents of Brookline.
You're a little past the 2 minutes. Do you have one concluding thought you wish to share?
Yes. Well, I was almost done, but around discussions of how the Brookline Library System gets more resources to meet its goals. I think the select board and trustees.
Okay, thank you. Are there any select board members who wish to have a follow-up question? I do not see any. So thank you to Rick Fredkin.
I think
Bernard,
Bernard.
I'm sorry, Mr. Green, you have a follow-up question.
Sorry, I couldn't get to my hand raised thing. So what was the question? Yeah, I'm actually interested in how libraries are changing into the future. I would wonder if you could just give 1 or 2 sentences as to how you see Brookline libraries sort of moving into the 21st century when where things are so different than they were when I was going to the Free Library of Philadelphia. So,
well, what we see as a trend across the country is actual physical books are less a part of the total offering that libraries provide, and they're lots of times they're offering resources in terms of technology, maker spaces, or other kinds of things that are common shared resources with the community, but also with the school systems in the surrounding areas. So we see that as a big trend.
Hey, thank you, Rick Fredkin. I would ask Devin Fields if you could please promote Angela Gomez to panelist, who is our next candidate.
Hi, Angela, this is Devin. You should see a prompt to accept the promotion to panelist. So if you could just accept that.
Okay, I think I see Angela Gomez's window in panelists. If you could turn on your camera and unmute. Angela Gomez, if you could please unmute your microphone and turn on your camera. Okay. Thank you. And as before, as noted, you have 2 minutes to answer the question. I would ask you to first state your pronouns if you are comfortable doing so, and then please answer the question, what will you bring to the Board of Trustees if appointed?
Angela Gomez, he, she. So as people talk about libraries, you hear that they're talking about that a library is a force for the common good. And I'd like to be able to join that force. As an applicant who's fairly new as a resident of Brookline, I believe that my background and experience will add a new perspective in several ways. First, in terms of library plans for current services and future services. If we see the library becoming more of a community resource, I know that it should be open to more groups. I have experience in working with Latino Spanish speaking groups through early intervention and literacy programs of doing projects where the parents would get their library cards and bring in children to offerings in the library, as well as doing language learning. What are other enhancements? Literacy. There is digital literacy and financial literacy. And obviously I can do better with the digital literacy. Secondly, how do we learn from other libraries? What research can we do for how do we attract different patrons by age, by background, by their interests? How do we design research to talk to current patrons, former patrons, and maybe people who never go to the library? What can we learn from them? I've worked with academics at the Institute for Social Research in Ann Arbor when I was a graduate student developing survey and carrying out.
We're at a little past the 2-minute mark. If you could give us a concluding thought.
Finally, what are the financial resources for the library? And starting with realistic salaries for the staff versus comparable libraries in the state or in the area, and whether other funding resources within the community. Well, I hope to join for the common good with the library board. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any select board members have any follow-up questions they wish to ask? I am not seeing any hands, so thank you. We will go to our final candidate. Linda Kabosh, I believe is how you pronounce her last name. I hope I have that correctly.
Yeah,
So,
that's okay.
okay.
Kabosh, however you like it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I am going to the same thing. 2 minutes to answer the question. If you're comfortable, please give your pronouns at the beginning. And the question is, what will you bring to the Board of Trustees if appointed?
Thank you. It would be she, her. As a lifelong devotee of libraries and in the more recent past of the Brookline Library, I would bring a strong work ethic, a desire to help improve the library in any way I am asked to. I have experience as a trustee presently on the board at the Massachusetts Medical Society, where I serve as secretary treasurer. I am on the Committee of Publications for the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the oldest and premier medical journals in the world. I am also on the Committee on Finance and have had experience reviewing audits, investment advisors' reports, budgets, and strategic planning, amongst other things. At Cotting School in Lexington, I was a trustee for 14 years and chaired the nominations committee. At Cotting, the interplay between town and the school with its private endowment was an important part of my learning and experience there. I work as a physician allergist and I love to garden. I am interested in history and architecture and participate in a book club on business, and an Arboretum book club. I am a fellow of the Boston Medical Library, Cantway Library at Harvard Medical School, and an alumni of McGill Medical School, which houses the Sir William Osler Library. I promise to come to the library board as an enthusiastic and motivated trustee. Please vote for me, Linda Kabash, for Brookline Library Trustee. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of the select board members have a follow-up question they might wish to ask? I am not seeing any hands from the members of the select board. Thank you, Dr. Kabash.
Thanks.
Devin,
Thank
you can return Dr. Kabash to the waiting room. Thank you. Before we get to the vote, the first thing I would ask is there any discussion that anybody wishes to do? Any hands? Anybody have any thoughts or things that they wish to say? From yes, Ms. Ashkenazi.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Venskoya.
I just want to say that
Mr. Fernandez.
for those that don't know who are watching, there were longer interviews. The trustees did actually, I thought, an excellent job of a very thorough interviews that were shared with us. So the select boards had the opportunity to see these much more in-depth interviews. So we saw a lot more than what you saw today. I have to say, I'm so impressed. I thank you all for applying. This is an important position. I appreciate you giving your time to the town, and thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Venskoya.
The simplest way to express my point is to ask if a motion would be in order to add 8 seats to the library trustees, or is it 9? I'm not sure.
It would be in this case,
Okay.
it would be 5. I would say to fill, but I will be making a similar point near the end. Yes, go on.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, what a qualified group of people. Very impressed. I think I will just keep to myself right now, which of the candidates I would vote for. But I will say that, they express themselves very well on what they uniquely bring to the board. And my vote is going to be based on the candidate who I think uniquely brings to the board something that the board most needs at this time. So I'll leave it at that until we express ourselves in our votes.
Thank you, Mr. Venskoya. Mr. Fernandez, and then Mr. Green.
Sure, thank you. And thank you to everyone who applied. I mean, just a fantastic group of people. I guess, the only thing I wanted to say is to encourage Director Slyman and the board to think about the ways which the library can retain as much of this talent as possible on various subcommittees and working groups. It looks like some folks have already done that work. But for those that aren't able to fill this slot at this time, to retain that talent and see how they can be involved in libraries in the future. I mean, just really great group of people. I can see how it's a tough decision for the board. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Mr. Green.
Sorry, someone muted me, Devin. I'd just like to ask, what the board sees as its needs as a board going into the future.
What our board sees as our needs.
Yeah.
That is a good question. And with 10 members of the board here, you'd probably get 20 different answers.
Oh, give me your answer.
My answer is that it's less of what the board needs and more looking at what the library needs. As always, I think we need we need a board that will advocate very well for the library. I think we need people who have some experience or knowledge about, deep knowledge about what libraries need and what Brookline's library needs in particular. I will say that includes right now the fascinating issue that the Brookline Library, while comparable to quite a few other libraries, member libraries and Minutemen nearby across the state, we're not actually matching the compensation for regular staff that other libraries are. And I think that is something that is going to have to come to the select board to town meeting very soon. But I would say that candidates who are sort of familiar with other libraries and things of that sort and how that's going to apply to our library would be of benefit. Are there any trustees who have any thoughts that they would like to share to this question from Mr. Green? My answer is sufficient. It is but one answer. I will take the opportunity to mention as all of the select board members who have noted, every time we go through this process, it is usually Jonathan Margolis, who is currently serving as vice chair, that makes the comment that he thinks that perhaps he should resign and maybe 3 or 4 other people should resign so that we can fill the board with people who obviously are very qualified. As when we had our last process about a year ago, when we had to fill 2 positions on this board, we find ourselves with a surfeit of riches. We have 6 candidates, all of whom I think we all agree have some very good qualifications. And we do have other ways that candidates can serve the library. If people are actually dedicated to serving the library, we have the Library Foundation that helps raises money for capital programs, including an upcoming renovation of the Brookline Village Library that literally was renovated over 20 years ago. We have the Friends of the Library that help raise money and do programs with the book sale. And of course, there's a lot that has to get restarted as we hope the pandemic, at least in Massachusetts, is sort of coming to its end. So what I would say, and I think the entire group here of trustees and select board members would agree to all 6 candidates, is that this is a very tough decision for all of us. But unfortunately, we can each only vote for one of you, each of us, to fill the vacancy. I will remind all the candidates that this is Brookline, this is an elected board. So the vacancy is being filled until the next election, which presumably will be in May unless things change. And at that election, the candidate would have to run to fill out the rest of the term, which would then go for another year. But anybody in town is always welcome to take out papers and run for library trustee. With that, I think I'm ready to take a roll call vote for who we are going to appoint to the vacant position. There are, as I mentioned before, I believe 15 of us voting. A majority vote is therefore 8 votes. Should none of the candidates receive 8 votes in the first round of voting, we do have to go on to a second and possibly third round until we have this. As per the way that we have done this in the past, we will take the vote by alphabetical order, which means, interestingly enough, that most of the select board will have cast their votes before most of the trustees, but that is how the process goes. I will call on each member of the Joint Convention to name one candidate who you are voting for to fill the vacancy. Miriam Ashkenazi.
I get to go first. Again, I thank you all, amazing candidates, but I'm going to cast my vote for Laurie Hawthorne.
Okay, thank you. Michael Burstein, that is me. I echo what has been said. We have 6 strong candidates. I am casting my vote for Laurie Hawthorne. Brett Fernandez.
Thank you. And with thanks to everyone who applied, I'll also cast my vote with Laurie Hawthorne.
Thank you. Bernard Green.
I don't mean to be different, but I would like to cast my vote for Rick Fredkin.
Okay, thank you. Heather Hamilton.
Hard decision, obviously, but I will go with Laurie Hawthorne.
Okay, thank you. Reggie Healy.
I'm going to go with Laurie Hawthorne also.
Thank you. Kristen Hung.
My vote goes to Laurie Hawthorne, but very tough decision indeed.
Thank you. Karen Livingston.
My vote also goes for Laurie Hawthorne.
Thank you. Carol Lowy. Carol, you're on mute.
Sorry. With thanks to all the candidates, I would like to vote for Laurie Hawthorne.
Thank you. John Margolis.
As others have said, a very tough choice, but my vote is for Rick Fredkin.
Thank you. Coinia Martin Page.
I just want to echo and give my thanks and admiration to all of our candidates. Brilliant applications, but I give my vote to Laurie Hawthorne.
Thank you. Matthew Shakespeare.
Obviously, it was a very crowded field with a lot of qualified candidates, but I think Laurie Hawthorne is the one who has gotten my vote.
Thank you. Judith Vanderkay.
Not to be a copycat, but I also agree with the hard choice that we have with these wonderful candidates, and I too vote for Laurie Hawthorne.
Thank you. John Van Scoyac.
Excuse me, I'm very impressed at the number of votes that Laurie has received. I am with those who favor Rick Fredkin.
Okay, thank you. And Sasan Zelka.
I'd like to express my gratitude for all the people who have applied. It's a tough decision. I hope that everyone who applied will run in May. Laurie and Rick have been my two top candidates, and I'd like to vote for Rick Fredkin.
Okay. Thank you very much. I believe I got everybody who is eligible to vote at the joint convention. Sarah Slyman, would you be willing to read off the final results? You're on mute. Yes, thank you.
Yes. Laurie Hawthorne received 11 votes and Rick Fredkin received 4 votes.
Okay. I would like to echo everybody else in thanking all the candidates for choosing to apply to the vacancy at this time. And as we've said before, there's always, sometimes there are other vacancies, there's always running for election, and there are other boards, and you should think about some of the other things like the Friends and Foundation that you might find your skills are useful for. I know occasionally also there are sometimes committees that we run that have non-trustees on them. That all said, I believe we now have we have now appointed a new trustee to the board, and I will be reaching out to that trustee to make sure that she will show up to the town clerk's office in order to get sworn in and to take care of any other details that need to be taken care of. My understanding from her application, for example, is that she is a member of the town's HR board. I believe that's what it's called. And my understanding is that that is a position that she will need to leave in order to join the trustees. Welcome to the trustees, Laurie Hawthorne. And Ms. Hamilton, I believe we do need to take an official roll call vote to dissolve the joint convention. Is that the case?
I remember that from prior conventions, so why don't we go ahead and do that?
I shall take a roll call vote. If you wish to dissolve the joint convention, please say yes. If you say no, I am going to hunt you down, and I wonder what it is you're trying to do. Ms. Ashkenazi?
Gee, under that pressure, I guess I'll have to say aye.
Mr. Burstein, aye. Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
I'm tempted to test you out on that threat, but aye.
Well, I would only do it if we ended up with a no for the majority. So, Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Ms. Healy?
Aye.
Dr. Hung?
Aye.
Ms. Livingston?
Aye.
Ms. Lowy?
Aye.
Ms. Margolis?
Present.
As always. Ms. Martin Page?
Aye.
Mr. Shakespeare?
Aye.
Ms. Vanderkay?
Aye.
Mr. Van Scoyac?
With a shout out to the fellow Van in this group, Judith, aye.
And Mr. Zelka?
Aye.
I declare the joint convention dissolved as of 8:06 p.m. and I turn the select board meeting back over to Chair Heather Hamilton, and the trustees are welcome to depart, as I will be doing as well. Thank you to the Select Board for all of your help with this process, as always.
Right, thank you. I'm pleased to report that I think that is the conclusion of our meeting as well. We were supposed to have a public hearing on the Iris Hotel, but that has been postponed. So, any concluding thoughts before we all enjoy getting ready for the upcoming holidays?
Oops. I'll just say that I'm at my sister's house and they brought me dinner, they brought me ice cream, I got a pat on the head. It's so nice. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody, if you celebrate.
Can we come over?
If you want to drive 6
It was
hours.
delicious. Yeah. It took me 6.5 hours to get here tonight, John.
Whoa.
Where are you?
Brookline, New York.
Brookline.
It's typically a 4-hour drive. We hit the New York border and it was literally a parking lot for the next 2.5 hours.
Yeah,
My
Tuesday
daughter's
has.
coming up from Brooklyn.
Good luck.
Well, best to all of you. I remember John taking a picture, I think last year, that said, "I'm thankful for these folks that I serve with." So I just wanted to say that tonight. I'm very, very grateful for you all.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you, Heather.
It's unanimous.
And to all the staff, thank you for
Yes,
everything
yeah.
you do and keeping us going. Appreciate you.
So much gratitude.
When do we get to meet together and be fed again?
Well, depending on the numbers after New Year's.
Yeah.
I thought Devin was gonna send us all pizza one Tuesday night, but it hasn't happened yet.
I would totally sign up for that. Okay. Have a good night, everyone.
All right.